Ground truth. That's the military term for what's really happening. And in mid June of 2025, that reality was all out war between Iran and Israel. The Iranians had already tested Israel's Iron Dome, Barak 8, and Arrow 3 defense systems. But this time was different, and changes had to be made to keep these systems operational and citizens safe. Learn more on this episode of Future Proof.
The future is here already. It's just not evenly distributed. Yet. Today's world teems with innovation. The nexus of hardware, software, and human ingenuity promises a revolution in possibilities. What does tomorrow look like? Witness Future Proof.
I'm so excited to have with me Dr. Moshe Cohen, a man I met earlier this year, but I feel like I've known him for many, many years, and he is quite the innovator. And to kick us off here, Dr. Cohen, I just want to say to you, congratulations on the success of Israel's air defense systems. I mean, I don't think you and I have spoken since that whole war broke out, and the Iranians were firing thousands, and the Yemenis were firing thousands of ballistic missiles, including hypersonics at Israel, and you shot down like 99.5% of them or something. It was just unbelievable. So you had to be proud, even though it was kind of a scary time. It worked, right?
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Eric. And again, great pleasure being here. And I miss talking to you.
Well, there you go. Yeah, I've studied
Yes.
this quite extensively, and the fact that you have a radar system that can detect the difference between a bird and a drone at what, like 100 kilometers, the fact that you're able to identify and classify threats, understand what is a threat, what is not a threat, and then of course deploy relatively low cost drones and projectiles to intercept these things. It's really amazing. I mean, it's the Star Wars vision that Ronald Reagan had 40 odd years ago, but en masse and at scale. And even though here in the States, we talk about the Patriot missile systems and things of that nature, at scale, they cannot handle hypersonic missiles, and you folks did it. So, again, congratulations on saving tens of thousands of lives, if not hundreds of thousands, and really putting a stop to what was a terrible aggression on the world stage. So, anyway, tell us your thoughts about watching as all those missiles were shot down.
Yeah. So actually, I'm glad to see rocket science actually works. Okay. So
That's funny.
25 years ago, we were able to predict such edge case scenarios where many thousands and tens of thousands of missiles, drones, UAVs will attack our civilians population, not just military, mostly on condensed civilian populations.
Yeah.
So we designed and deployed a multi-layer air defense system. We have the Arrow missiles that handles the space, the ICBMs, the intercontinental ballistic missiles. We have the David Sling and Barak 8 that is the middle layer that handles the cruise missiles, the UAVs, and some of the drones. And we have the Iron Dome system that is the final shortest range system of Israel. This, again, within the Iran war, we were able to intercept the threats in more than 95% success rate. And using the discipline of the Israeli civilian, we were able to minimize the casualties.
Wow.
What it's worth to notice at this stage is the pace of innovation that the IDF and the Israeli population were able to demonstrate throughout this war. So giving you a few examples. The first example would be that I can share it now, that we actually had an arrow shortage during the war. So what we were able to do is to improve the Iron Dome system to cover for the arrow only with AI modifications. And our team took part of that. Okay, so we improved a missile defense system in war times and improved its capabilities by, I think, 5 times. And now it is capable to support much broader variants of threats, aerial threats. So this is a big wow for the IDF and of course for the DDR&D, which is the IDF's equivalent to DARPA, worked extensively 24/7 around the clock and deployed now combat-proven capabilities at scale. Second
That's
thing, which
amazing. Oh yeah, go
yeah,
ahead. Go ahead.
it's actually amazing. Second thing that's worth mentioning is that in the beginning of the war, the IDF launched many hundreds of Iron Dome interceptors on birds, confusing them as drones. This is the actual resolution limitation of the radars and the detection systems that are currently deployed. And we were able to improve that with physical AI, okay, to differentiate between the movement of the center of mass and the wings of the birds, and from hundreds of kilometers, and by that differentiating them from the UAVs and the drones, and we nearly completely stopped this bird interception with the Iron Dome. And all of these amazing breakthroughs happened during wartime.
Wow. Well, it speaks to the fact that you have an architecture for this platform that allows you to do modifications in the software layer, in the AI layer, which then optimize what the physical assets do, right?
Yes, exactly. Everything is around the architecture. Yeah, and being a core leadership, taking a leadership part in Israel multi-layer air defense, missile defense systems, we did our best to have the most scalable and future-proof architecture that is possible, that was possible in the time of development. So this enabled us to software modify and software upgrade these systems during wartime.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive. And you know, obviously here in the States, we have a much larger threat landscape as the attack landscape is humongous. And there are real threats. I saw you were posting on LinkedIn about Russia's latest announcement of nuclear powered missiles. Even and are they hypersonics too? Or they're nuclear powered cruise missiles so they can travel low and they can go for days? I mean, and you know, we've learned through hard experience now that Putin obviously doesn't really care about loss of life. I mean, 2 million people have died in eastern Ukraine as they are grinding forward with absolute reckless abandon. And now they're threatening to give these kinds of missiles to Venezuela. We need the Golden Dome here in the United States. And I'll do whatever I can to try to help you get into the mix because your system can be expanded to cover for the United States, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But I think not everything is so optimistic. Looking at the United States, Israel, and the global threats map of our adversaries, the adversaries move fast. They move fast, and they target our weaknesses. Okay, and the biggest weakness of any air defense, every air defense system, is the detection system. What you cannot see, you cannot defeat, and this is exactly what our adversaries know, and they are firing and targeting to our weakest spots. We are seeing it in the new development by the Russians and the Chinese, and how they distribute such extremely dangerous weapons to Iran and North Korea. So this is an extremely worrying trend that we need to be on top of. I think we already started seeing that in the last days of the wars between Israel and Iran, when a few missiles maneuvering hypersonics penetrated our missile defense system and created casualties and loss of lives. And this is extremely critical in these times when developing the United States missile defense, the Golden Dome.
Yeah, we have to obviously be ever vigilant. And I know that a big part of the detection is having the machines to do all that. Obviously, the radar that you have in Israel is very, very powerful. But again, it's a much smaller landscape to protect. Here in the States, we have, we have expansive territory, and we've seen a lot of strange things. I mean, in the last administration, we had that Chinese balloon hovering over our ICBM sites out in the West, and it went across the entire United States, and then they shot it down. And you're like, what are you guys doing? I mean, what I heard, what I read is that there is a very serious concern that they were gathering intelligence, that they were pulling information about the exact geolocation of these ICBM sites. I mean, this is real threat that faces our nation now. And I think that in many ways we've been kind of lulled into a false sense of security about that. But what do you think?
Yeah, so first of all, as being a systems engineer, you need to look at the US as a tile-able area. Okay, you need to select let's say a sample region for protection, prove the concept on it, and then scale the system.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and the foundations of such architecture should be should be founded on very strong detection layer. And then again, looking at the US system, I see it as a weak spot currently in air defense and in the Golden Dome. Then scalable software architecture, data processing architecture, and compute architecture. This is key because as we scale the system from a single area tile to the entire US, the data and the compute will explode. Okay, so the architecture must support intelligent tiling and scaling, hyperscaling actually, of the data quantities and the compute resources. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
but again, this is key because there is now a hot discussion in the US right now, in the Pentagon, White House, specifically on the Golden Dome, whether choosing today's technologies and integrate them fast and deploy them into the battlefield, or taking a risk and going for more innovative breakthrough technologies. And this is a hot live discussion in the US top floors and leadership right now. Okay, and maybe 10 years ago or 15 years ago, if you were like in the early 2000s, maybe deploying as-is systems would make sense. But today, in 2025, we are, as you know, in an exponential change times, okay? Things are changing very, very fast. So today's technologies are not future-proof, will not defend us from the threats of today and tomorrow. And this is a fact, okay? And now if you deploy expensive traditional technologies to a mega project like the Golden Dome, you're playing directly into the hands of our adversaries. They know your detection system will be limited. They know your interceptors will be expensive and limited, and they can easily financially exhaust your defense and your economy. And this is a huge trouble for us.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So we saw the U.S. Navy was fighting with the Yemenis in that region of the world for a couple of years, and here in the U.S., I was, continuously disappointed in the media for ignoring this because they're very politically driven, and they typically want one side of the political divide to win at really any expense. And I think that's part of why we have this lack of genuine concern for what is taking place. Because your point is that even the most advanced systems from 20 years ago are incredibly vulnerable right now. I mean, we saw, just give you an example and get your take on this. I remember after Putin invaded Ukraine, that was in February of 2022. In May of 2022, some group, Dark Side, took down the Colonial Pipeline on the eastern seaboard of the United States, which is how I think gasoline was transported all up and down the eastern United States, and they shut that down. Now, at the time, the New York, even the Wall Street Journal ran an article that said, "Oh, DarkSide says they have no connection to state governments." And I'm thinking, why on earth would you trust hackers who just took down our supply line? Like these people are lying, right? And it was the subhead of
Yeah.
the article. I'm like, this is clearly from Russia. They're clearly tampering with our systems as a threat to us, and they succeeded in taking. I mean,
Yeah.
you had no gasoline on the East Coast. That's an example. I mean, we never got to the bottom of it. I bet my last dollar that Russia was behind it or some Russian proxy to cause us trouble. But when you have that kind of a disconnect between the media and what's really happening in the world about very serious issues, that's very dangerous, right, Moshe?
Yeah, it's extremely dangerous, and these are one of the reasons where for the U.S. leadership, especially the White House, being extremely worried on how to develop the best missile defense systems for the U.S. And this was recently encouraged by and supported by a new caucus that was initiated. Now it is chaired by Senator Sheehy, and the purpose of this caucus is to make sure that the Golden Dome does it right. It is being architectured right, it being developed right, and of course deployed right.
Hmm. Yeah, and you have to think, and maybe we can get into this in the next segment, but I'd like to kind of get it a bit into your architecture of the systems in Israel, because you mentioned there are a whole array of systems. You've got the Iron
Mhm.
Dome, you've got Barak 8, you've got Arrow, David Sling, but these all work together to identify threats, and then the appropriate system fires off what it needs to be able to handle those threats. And let's face it, I mean, we just saw proven in real time this system works. It works incredibly well. I mean, when you look at the number of missiles that were fired, and to your point, at civilian populations inside of Israel, not at just military bases, not at factories for building drones, things of this nature. No, they specifically targeted civilian locations. And you look at what's happening with the Russia-Ukraine war, Russia does the same thing. They are indiscriminate. They don't care. They're trying to blow up power stations and water stations and infrastructure basically to allow people to live their lives. I mean, that is the darkest of the dark, and it's happening in our real world. And I think that now we hear Putin talking about sending these new hypersonics to Venezuela, which, of course, is a narco state. I mean, the Trump administration has been blowing up these narco boats. Kind of hard to believe that they're just fishermen when they're loaded with tons and tons of fuel to make this long trip. And like, okay, I think they're bad guys. There's still some conversation about that, but let's kind of dive into what it takes to design a system like that from the ground up. Because to your point, there's hardware, there's software, there's AI that needs to be infused at various points in the architecture. I do want to get into the weeds a bit about the architecture of this whole solution. So we mentioned you have the Iron Dome, you have Barak 8, you have David Sling, you have the Arrow system. Arrow takes the from outer space, right? Because some of these hypersonics, they literally go up into outer space and they point down and I mean I saw some footage of it and it's really terrifying. I mean, you see how fast they come down and the damage that they do. And the fact that you guys shot down what over 95% is just brilliant. But I mean, this is a long journey to get here. And I remember in one of your LinkedIn posts, you talked about an epiphany that you had late one night, a mathematical epiphany, because really you're a research scientist and a mathematician, and you're leveraging the power of math in systems design to be able to address these terrible threats, right? Talk to us about the foundation of that whole system. What is software defined, where you can put the AI into place, and how you can optimize in real time during wartime. I mean, you optimize the Iron Dome to handle even more threats. Talk to us about what goes into that whole process of designing and building that system.
Yeah, for sure. So as in a rigorous systems engineering process, everything starts with defining the operational scenarios. Okay, what it is that we want to protect from. Okay, and this is the key question: what is we want to protect from? Where is the threat going to arrive? What are the quantities, the velocities range, the speeds, the altitudes, the warheads, and how we want to intercept them. What is the outcome that we want to get? You want to let them get into our border. You want to fire them out of, intercept them out of our borders. So this called CONOP. So the concept of operations and the threats definitions is the starting point of each air defense system design. Okay. Once we have that, we need to make sure that our detection system, which is the actual eyes of the air defense system, can detect, track, and classify the threats. Otherwise, they will create huge damage, right? Otherwise, it will be broken. So the detection system is a world, is a whole world. It's comprised of satellites, first and foremost, to achieve early detection, early intelligence, early warning. So, for example, Israel's satellites were able to, in the war, were able to recognize that the Iranians are preparing for a launch.
Wow.
Okay, so we actually knew that the Iranians are going to launch ballistic missiles, drones, and UAVs on us. This helped us focus our active defense, which is the radars, to the specific areas and improve the chances of active detection and tracking. So we have the satellite systems as the early and first detection. By the way, it can be combined with on-the-spot human and signal intelligence. Okay, because if we have some agents on the ground in Iran, they can inform us that there is some suspicious activity. Okay, so early detection, agents, human, and satellites is the first layer of every air defense system. But this is not enough because satellites cannot track missiles, especially not hypersonics, especially not cruise and low-flying missiles. So once the satellites and early detections detected a suspicious activity, the radars come into play, and they transmit a very high power radio frequency beam that interacts with the threat, with the target, and create reflections. The reflections are being processed by the radar processor, and then you create an image of the target, or a signal or a spectrum signature of the target. Based on this information, the targets are being classified. So a hypersonics, a drone, swarms, a cruise missiles, etc., etc. And then the information is being transferred into the semantic layer. So we have the early warning, the radars, the semantics. So this is the brain now, and the brain plans the optimal interception plan according to a predefined KPI, predefined set of KPIs. So it means maximum probability of success, interception, cost optimization, okay, multiple interception attempts, and more KPIs that are typically defined by the policymaker. Okay, once the interception plan has been selected, it is approved by the operator. Then it press the pickle, and interceptors are launched. Okay, so for the more expensive ICBMs, expensive and big and potentially non-conventional hypersonics, we use the Arrow missiles, Arrow interceptors, with clear target of intercepting them in space. We don't want them to reach to the atmosphere and penetrate. However, the space system is relatively slow. Okay, it cannot intercept fast cruise missiles, for example. Okay, so in order to intercept UAVs, large drones, and cruise missiles, we have the David Sling and Barak 8 systems, which are much faster and cheaper. Okay, so these are, so if we see, if we detect, if the semantics and sensors detect a cruise missiles and drones. We typically also prepare the David Sling and Barak 8 systems. And only for short-range missiles and last trials, we actually use the Iron Dome, because this is the shortest range system, which suits more to Gaza threats. Okay, so very short range threats, and not to ICBMs and drones and cruise missiles. So the optimal interception plan and execution includes sensing, detection, classification, AI planning, and effectors optimization.
And you're actually able to classify what kind of weapon it is that's coming, right? This is a key part of the process. And what really impresses me, honestly, is of course the radar is very powerful going out, but then the reflections that come back, that's what you need to process. And it can be very challenging to process that kind of information. So you've got some pretty good algorithms that can determine, based upon the feed, number one, what this thing is, but number two, its trajectory, because that's what you're really identifying for, right? You're solving for the exact trajectory of the weapon. Where is it going to be? Not at this moment in time, but at a future moment in time. And that's where you send the ordnance to intercept it, right?
Exactly. It's called smart proportional navigation with continuous PIP estimation. PIP is the predicted interception point. So we actually have a very smart AI-centric system that predicts the route, okay? And the interceptors are being launched to the PIP, okay, to the area of the PIP, and then they have very small error to close in order to get the interception.
Wow.
Okay, it's quite nice. What an amazing feature that we have in the Israeli air defense system is the prediction where exactly the threat will hit or supposed to hit. And if it went ahead predicted to hit in a desert area, we will not launch any interceptor at all. We will save the cost and the energy. And this is combat proven for more than a decade now.
Wow. That's crazy. I mean, it's
Yeah,
really impressive.
easy.
And some of the interceptors actually have the capacity to error correct themselves, right? So it gets launched, and then you have the capacity to communicate with that. And if if the perceived impact point changes, the device can actually change its trajectory too in real time to hit the target. Is that right?
Yeah, it's perfectly right.
Yeah. That's pretty impressive. And yeah, you think about so I have a good friend of mine here in Pittsburgh. I want to introduce you to him, quite frankly, because they're doing really amazing work with AI and with some of these new algorithms. But he was telling me their company is based in Israel, and one of his colleagues who's talking to him on the phone back when this is happening is, "Hey, I just want to show you what's going on here." And he held his phone up to the sky so you could see the interceptions taking place. He's like, "You guys are tough." I mean, they're just sitting there like it's like you made popcorn that night when the attack started, right? But
we
this
made
is
popcorn at that time, and I think we owe our lives to these systems and to the great people, engineers, scientists, and of course operators that make everything happen.